I still remember the sound of the zipper on her suitcase, sharp, final, echoing through the apartment like a warning bell. My wife moved around the bedroom with a cold efficiency, grabbing clothes, slamming drawers, her face set in stone. She didn't look at me as she spat out the words that would haunt me for years. "You're a loser. I'm done wasting my life with you." I stood there, numb, my mind scrambling for something to say, some way to fix what was already broken beyond repair. But she was already at the door, her back to me, her future somewhere I couldn't follow. When the door clicked shut, the silence was deafening. I stared at the empty space she left behind, wondering if she was right about me. I thought that was the lowest point of my life. I had no idea what the next 6 years would bring. And the weeks after she left, the world felt hollow. Friends who once filled our apartment with laughter stopped calling, unsure of what to say or which side to take. I watched my phone gather dust, each silent day confirming the suspicion that maybe I really was as worthless as she claimed. The bills piled up, and I found myself staring at the ceiling at night, wondering how I'd ever climb out of the hole I'd fallen into. There were days when getting out of bed felt like a victory, and nights when the loneliness pressed in so tightly I could barely breathe. But life, stubborn as it is, kept moving. I took a job at a small hardware store, just to keep the lights on. At first, I kept my head down, afraid of pity or judgment. But over time, the routine became a lifeline. I started to recognize the regulars, learned their stories, and even made a few friends, people who saw me for who I was, not who I'd been told I was. Slowly, the fog began to lift. I found myself laughing again, even if just for a moment. Just when I thought I'd finally found peace, the past came knocking. It was a rainy Thursday when I heard the knock at my door, 3 sharp raps that cut through the quiet of my evening. I opened it to find a man in a crisp suit, holding a leather briefcase and an expression that was all business. "Are you Daniel Harper?" he asked, glancing down at a folder in his hands. My heart skipped. No one had called me by my full name in years, and certainly not with that kind of formality. I nodded, suddenly aware of the chipped paint on my door and the faded carpet behind me. He introduced himself as a lawyer, but wouldn't say much more. "I have something for you," he said, holding out a thick envelope with my name written in careful script. My mind spun with possibilities. Had something happened to my ex-wife? Was I being sued? The lawyer insisted we sit down before he explained anything, his face unreadable. I led him to my small kitchen table, hands trembling as I took the envelope. The weight of it felt ominous, like a stone in my palm. What could possibly be so important after all these years? The lawyer's voice was gentle but steady as he broke the news. My ex-wife had passed away suddenly, a car accident on a highway far from here. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. I hadn't seen her in years, but the finality of it hit me harder than I expected. Before I could process the loss, the lawyer slid the envelope across the table. "She left this for you," he said quietly. Inside was a letter, her handwriting instantly recognizable, sharp, slanted, impatient even on the page. I hesitated, then unfolded it, my hands shaking. The words spilled out in a rush of regret and confession. She wrote about the anger that had consumed her, the mistakes she'd made, and the emptiness that followed after she left. She admitted she'd been wrong about me, that she'd let her own fears and disappointments poison what we had. She apologized for the things she'd said, for the way she'd made me feel small. "You were never a loser," she wrote. "I just couldn't face my own failures." Tears blurred the ink as I read her final lines. She wanted me to have what she'd left behind, a sum of money she'd saved, a small inheritance she hoped would help me start over. I felt a storm of emotions, anger at the years lost, confusion at her sudden generosity, and a strange, bittersweet sense of closure. Was this her way of making amends, or just another cruel joke? The days that followed were a blur of restless nights and old memories resurfacing. I stared at the letter, the check, the legal documents, wondering if accepting them would mean accepting her apology, or letting her off the hook for everything she'd put me through. I reached out to a few friends I'd lost touch with, people who'd seen me at my lowest. Some urged me to take the money and move on, others warned me not to let the past dictate my future. I even visited my old neighborhood, walking the same streets where I'd once felt invisible, haunted by her words. But as I retraced those steps, I realized how much I'd changed. I wasn't the broken man she'd left behind. I'd built a life for myself, piece by piece, without her approval or validation. The inheritance wasn't a reward for my suffering, it was a chance to honor how far I'd come. So I signed the papers, not out of spite or revenge, but as a quiet declaration of my own resilience. For the first time, I realized my worth wasn't defined by anyone else's opinion. With the inheritance, doors I'd long ago closed in my mind began to creak open. I enrolled in night classes, something I'd always wanted but never dared to try. I donated to a local shelter, remembering the nights I'd felt alone and wishing someone had reached out. Slowly, I built a life that felt like mine, one shaped by choice, not circumstance. The bitterness that had once colored every memory of my marriage began to fade, replaced by a quiet gratitude for the lessons I'd learned in the aftermath. One evening, I sat by my window and read her letter one last time. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined me. I realized I could forgive her, not for her sake, but for my own. I folded the letter and put it away, feeling lighter than I had in years. Sometimes, life's greatest vindication comes not from revenge, but from rising above and finding peace within yourself.